Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of our discussion series. I'm Ara Khachatourian, the editor of Asbarez. For the past 2 weeks, we have witnessed unprecedented events taking place here in the United States, with the insurrection on the US Capitol, followed by the second impeachment of a sitting president, and of course, yesterday's inauguration, which ushered in a new president and a new vice president, who also is a first in our country. She is the first woman to assume that role. She's the first African American, as well as the South Asian. And of course, she's our own California's former US Senator Kamala Harris. To talk about that, and of course, everything that has happened with Armenia and how a new Congress will be addressing these issues, is a familiar face to our program, Adam Schiff, Congressman Adam Schiff, who represents the 28th District here in California. Congressman, welcome again to our program. It's good to have you.
All right, it's great to join you. Thanks for having me on again.
And the new Congress started, and it is your 20th year, so congratulations on that as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, I kind of want to start by talking about everything that happened in the past couple of weeks. Tell us about what it felt like to be in Congress while the attack was happening a couple of weeks ago. It must have been horrifying, but I'd like to hear from you what you felt when you were inside.
Well, in the morning, I was one of 4 members of the House who was asked by the Speaker to prepare the opposition, to help manage the opposition to this effort to deny certification of election results in key states. So I was speaking on the House floor. I was preparing to rebut arguments made by some of my colleagues, and wasn't really paying attention to what was happening outside the building until I looked up and the Speaker was gone. Which was not the plan. She was very much intent on presiding the entire day and night. And then I saw the Capitol Police come back in the chamber and quickly escort our number 2, the Majority Leader, Steny Hoyer, off the floor. Now, I've been there long enough to know that there are false alarms. Sometimes planes, they go into the airspace around the Capitol by accident and there are evacuations. So even then, I didn't know how serious it was until the Capitol Police came back in the chamber, said that there were intruders in the Capitol, then came back in the chamber shortly thereafter and said, you need to get gas masks out. And then we could hear the mob. And literally, when I left the House floor, they were breaking glass. They were breaking windows and the doors to try to get into the chamber. And Capitol Police were drawing their weapons. So it was a pretty horrifying experience. And it was just so sad also to think that it come to this. And I couldn't help but think how the rest of the world was viewing us, the citadel of democracy, under assault by this mob, incited by our own president. And it just showed me how far we have to go to rebuild.
And what is that process of rebuilding, in your opinion? I mean, last week Congress took action and it was unprecedented where a sitting president was impeached for a second time. What do you think those steps are? Because it was an attack on our democracy.
Well, I think it's going to require us to speak the truth after months and months and years of lies coming out of the White House. Speak the truth about the elections that we just had, that were free and fair, and we are frankly very fortunate that we had brave local elected elections officials who conducted the tally correctly, and local elections board and electors and secretaries of state who withstood pressure from the President of the United States. Courts that did their job and upheld the law. We came very close to losing our democracy had any of those people given way. And in order to, I think, rebuild, we're going to have to strengthen some of the guardrails of our democracy, things that we thought no president could do, but they could apparently get away with it. everything from abusing the pardon power to weaponizing the Justice Department to enriching themselves through the office of the presidency, ignoring congressional subpoenas, blowing off oversight, you name it, attacking and vilifying the press as the enemy of the people. That's stuff you see in dictatorships, not in the United States. And so we're going to have to put in place legal protections to strengthen our guardrails against that kind of a president ever trying to do what this last one did.
Mm-hmm. And yesterday, President Biden, in his inaugural address, was very forceful in criticizing such a movement, but also extended a hand to, you know, the 70+ million people who didn't vote for him. Is there hope that this country will unite? And how do you think this administration is going to handle the specifics of that? Are they going to reach out to some of those outspoken people? What do you think what do you think is going to happen?
Well, I think the more I've thought about this over the last few weeks and months, the country made a really good choice in picking Joe Biden, that this is really the right hour for him. The continuity that he brings, the calm hand that he brings, his very fundamental decency and character, his experience in dealing with tragedy and healing, he is really meant for this hour. And I think very much the same of Kamala Harris. So they're going to do their very best. We saw that yesterday. Yesterday's speech was uplifting and positive and designed to heal. So I think they're doing all the right things. Now, will it be reciprocated? Will Mitch McConnell and the Republicans in Congress try to work with Joe Biden and reach across the aisle? I have to hope so. It's not like we are in good circumstances. We are in crisis right now. We have a pandemic that killed 400,000 of our fellow citizens, neighbors, family members, and friends. And if we're not careful, we'll lose hundreds of thousands more. We have an answer. We have multiple vaccines. We need to work together to get them out. We need to combat misinformation about vaccines. And we can do this. And I think we're going to have to do it together. So I'm grateful for the leadership that Joe Biden is showing. And I think it's exactly what we need right now.
Mm-hmm. And of course, you have the pending Senate trial, and we'll be following that. But I want to come back to the pandemic. Before the year closed, Congress passed a new set of new stimulus package. Is there a discussion of Congress revisiting that package and perhaps adding more benefits to the unemployed, to renters and whatnot? Are you looking at taking another crack at that bill, or is that it?
No, absolutely. We're looking at providing more relief. Indeed, Joe Biden has proposed that we pass a $1.9 trillion additional package. Those checks that are going out to Americans for $600 would be increased by another $1,400, so individuals would get $2,000 of help right now. But it would also help with food for those who are hungry. It would help with rental assistance for those who can't pay their rent. It would help with small business assistance, so more small businesses can survive. It has money for schools and a plan for schools to reopen within 100 days in K-8 and the resources to do so safely. These are just some of the things that are included. Extended unemployment compensation for those who, through no fault of their own, can't go back to work right now. Right now, a lot of these things are going to expire in March. The pandemic's not going to be over in March. I wish it were. This would extend a lot of those protections until September. I think we all know we're going to need the help until then. Hopefully by then we're in a different place. But we need to meet the needs of our citizens, and so we're absolutely going to try to move this. This is, I think, among our very highest priorities.
And of course, California has been hit again very hard, and we're There's no room in emergency rooms. ICUs are booked. As someone representing the state, and especially a portion of the LA County that has been hit harder, what can Californians look to Congress to do?
Well, I think that, and this is very good news for Californians. In the past, there's been an attitude in Washington, anywhere but California. That is, we'll do anything for anyone except for California. I remember when I was in the state legislature in Sacramento, there was a view, anything but Los Angeles. And now we have people who not only understand California, but the vice president is from California. And so we can expect much greater attention to the needs, whether it's in terms of floods or fires or earthquakes. I've been championing for years an early earthquake warning system, and we've gotten a lot of funding. It's now up and running, but it needs to be further built out. I think we can expect even more support from the new administration for that effort. But I also think that given that the pandemic epicenter right now is in Southern California, we can expect a lot of attention, energy, resources, and help for California to get through this pandemic. And we can also expect the country, once again, to look to California for innovation and ideas. It used to be as California goes, so goes the rest of the nation. I think we're going to see a lot more of that now, that there will be a greater receptivity to what California has to offer.
And plus, of course, there's the personal responsibility that everyone has to shoulder, which is do the social distancing, the stay at home, wear the masks and everything else. And I think with this new wave, the message has hit home. Of course, unfortunately, there are still small businesses really suffering and people really suffering. And hopefully together, as President Biden said yesterday, in a united way, we can confront this thing. But what's been created, we're moving toward a year of this kind of lockdown, stay at home, people working from home. Nobody was anticipating that this thing was going to go so long. And some people have gotten kind of used to this situation. What is your advice of how we can effectively emerge from this once everyone's vaccinated and whatnot?
Well, I think there's a real hunger for people to go back to life pre-pandemic, where you could go out to dinner or to the movies, where you could go visit your grandparents without worrying that your visit might end up killing them. So there's a real hunger for just kind of community interaction again. At the same time, I would expect that we will resume and continue certain things that we found to be beneficial, like telework. There are a lot of people who discovered, gosh, they can do a lot of their work from home. They don't need to battle traffic an hour each way every day. They don't need to travel across country, across the world to do business meetings. They can do it on Zoom. And I think a lot of that will stay with us and allow us to be more productive and spend more time with our family and less time going to and from the workplace. So I would hope that we'll make use of what positive things we've learned through this experience. But I'm just eager to get back to life as it was. My father will be 93 next month. I haven't seen him now in about a year. And
Oh, wow.
I want to go visit my father. And I know there are millions of others around the country who have not been able to see their loved ones. I'm fortunate. We haven't lost anyone in my family, but I have so many friends who have. And so my heart goes out to all those who've been even more personally touched by this pandemic. And I do think it obviously will change our lives forever. Hopefully we will put in place the safeguards to prevent us from having to deal with another pandemic for another century, or hopefully never again. But I can see some experiences being continued in a positive way, like the experience we've had with telework.
Mm-hmm. And hopefully we can all become more empathetic at the end of this reality, because empathy is really important to move society forward, I think. Congressman, last time you and I spoke in this interview, Artsakh was under attack, under heavy attack, and we all saw how it ended with the signing of the November 9th agreement, which, while ended the military actions in the Karabakh conflict zone, it also forced the surrender of territory, significant and historic territory in Artsakh. And now we're also seeing, as the agreement is being implemented, some loss of territory in Armenia proper. You stood by Armenia, Artsakh, and the Armenian community. Your poignant speech at the October rally in Los Angeles really brought hope to the Armenian American community. But the reality is there's this agreement, there's Russia, and unfortunately Turkey with a direct involvement. Where does that leave the OSCE Minks Group co-chairmanship, which has been for 20 some odd years mediating this conflict?
It really needs to be reactivated and energized and given the central role it's supposed to play. For too long, I think it has been anemic. And when you have a situation as combustible as we've had along the line of contact, anemic is dangerous. And, you know, many of us warned for years and years if Azerbaijan was allowed to continue its provocative military action. And the Minks Group, or even the United States representatives of the Minks Group, would do is call on both sides to refrain from violence, that was incentivizing the aggressor. And that's indeed just the message that Azerbaijan got. And why they embarked on this military campaign to remake the map using military force. So this hasn't been resolved. There is an uneasy truce that was imposed on Artsakh and Armenia at the barrel of a gun. But there are pressing issues regarding territory, regarding POWs, regarding war crimes, regarding preservation of historical and cultural artifacts and places. And the Minks Group needs to get busy and needs to initiate a meaningful process to resolve these issues. So that's what I am certainly hoping that the new administration will do and prioritize. We don't want to allow Russia and Turkey to decide these questions. That's basically what's happened with this truce. We want the Minks Group to make these decisions in consultation with Armenia and Artsakh, so that we can have a lasting and meaningful peace.
That is something that I think everyone wants, for the Minks Group to get re-engaged in the process, but the tenor, especially emanating from Moscow and Baku, suggests that, you know, the leadership is talking about, well, the conflict is over, let's not talk about it as conflict, and the Minks Group's role is going to be more humanitarian, et cetera, et cetera. But there is a political resolution or settlement that has been discussed, which also involves the status of Karabakh, which last week Foreign Minister Lavrov, and prior to him President Putin and certainly President Aliyev, have all said, well, there is no discussion of the status. How can we bring that back onto the drawing board, I guess?
Well, we have to insist. I mean, that is very much within the portfolio of the Minks Group, whether Russia likes it or Turkey likes it or Azerbaijan likes it or not. That is indeed the mission of the Minks Group. And so we need, I think, proactive leadership by the United States. France has been, I think, a very strong leader on these issues. We need to partner with the French to make sure that they're given the urgency and priority that they should. But you know, these status questions are not resolved. There is a temporary truce, and even that is being violated by Azerbaijan. So we just need to make sure that the Minsk Group is reinvigorated and engages and is determined to find solutions to this.
Two houses of the French Parliament passed legislation recognizing Artsakh and actually urging President Emmanuel Macron to follow suit. You certainly suggested it last fall and prior to that. Do you think there'll be movement in possibly having the Congress put forth this type of a resolution and urging the administration to move forward in recognizing Artsakh?
I do, and indeed at the end of last year, we did introduce legislation, Frank Pallone, Jackie Spear, myself, and others, to recognize the independence and self-determination of Artsakh. So I would expect a similar effort this year, and we have to make sure that when we talk about self-determination, that we don't allow Azerbaijan to ethnically cleanse these areas so that a vote on self-determination is skewed because Armenians have been disenfranchised by being forced out of the region. So I do expect legislation to be reintroduced and a push in Congress. And this, I think, has to be an important way of keeping the pressure on to get the Minsk Group to do its job, that the United States is prepared to make its own recognition of Artsakh in the absence of a meaningful peace process.
Last December, the U.S. National Security Advisor said an involvement by Turkey is a non-starter, essentially, but we've seen that Turkey has managed to, either through backdoor negotiations with Moscow or whatnot, is actually taking a direct role in the peacekeeping effort by sending troops and establishing a joint Russian and Turkish monitoring center, which is going to be very near Artsakh. What can the United States do in this aspect? Turkey has essentially, overstepped.
Well, the United States needs to make it abundantly clear that no, there's not going to be a Russia-Turkey workaround. We're going to work through the Minsk Group. And what's more, the new administration needs to pick up where the last one left off, which was in sanctioning Turkey for deploying these Russian S-400 anti-aircraft systems for essentially violating its NATO obligations. I was pleased to see Tony Blinken, our Secretary of State designate, talk about the need to be clear-eyed about Turkey. And we need to, I think, not only view Turkey through the proper lens, and that is that it is not only not meeting its NATO commitments, but has endangered U.S. troops in Syria, has been cozying up to Iran, but we also need to fundamentally re-examine these waivers we've been giving Azerbaijan under Section 907 that have allowed it to militarize further. And while the military support we've given Azerbaijan has not been for offensive weapons like those that we used in the conflict, nonetheless, unless there's a maintenance of effort required, Azerbaijan can simply move money around, use US money for certain purposes that it would otherwise have to pay for, freeing up more money to put into offensive military technologies. So I think a reexamination of both our relationship with Turkey and Azerbaijan is in order. And I think a Turkish, Russian end run around Minsk needs to be vigorously opposed by the United States.
Mm-hmm. How open do you think Moscow would be to that? Because you're essentially going into their backyard.
Look, Moscow loves to have another frozen conflict on its hands where it can play peacemaker and it can station troops and make all the parties more reliant on Russia and the beneficence of Russia. But, look, this is the first administration that's coming in not determined to do a reset with Russia, because Russia is not in a place to do a reset, but to request intelligence analysis of their interference in our last election, the 2020 election, Russian allegations of Russian bounties on the troops, on U.S. troops in Afghanistan, and other malign conduct. Russia's hack of our private companies, of our government agencies, and analysis of what sanctions we ought to place on Russia. You know, we're going to need to compartmentalize things. We're going to need to push back vigorously against Russia when it's acting in malign fashion. We're going to need to be able to try to find common ground on things like the New START Treaty, where it's in our interest and Russia's interest to prevent another nuclear arms race. And so it's going to be a complicated relationship. But in terms of Armenia and Artsakh, the United States needs to understand and act on the conviction that what's in Russia's interest there is not in our interest. And we need to be vigorous in the pursuit of our own national interests.
And President Biden went on record last December of 2019, in a discussion with the New York Times, where he very firmly said that the administration in Turkey has to go and the United States needs to make more of an effort to talk to the various other elements that are active in Turkish society. At the same time, of late, some of these think tank affiliated op-eds are actually suggesting that America pump more money into the Turkish economy and thus try to bring Turkey back into some kind of a Western fold. What are your thoughts on that? Turkey has essentially, as you just said, has overstepped beyond anything in the region and around the world.
Look, I think Erdogan's made it abundantly clear that he wants to be the autocratic ruler of Turkey for an indefinite period of time. Turkey's become the leading jailer of journalists in the world. And Erdogan's made it clear that he has no respect for human rights, either in Turkey or, frankly, on the streets of Washington, D.C., that he intends to move away from the West and move closer to countries like Iran and to countries like Russia. And I don't think by suggesting a greater economic investment or that we have to somehow bail out Turkey's economy, that's going to change where Erdogan wants to take that country. I think the only way of curbing those autocratic and destructive impulses by Erdogan is by pushing back vigorously and letting Erdogan know that there's a price to be paid if that's the direction he tries to take Turkey in. So I couldn't disagree more with those think tanks, but look, Turkey's put a lot of money into lobbyists in Washington, into funding different chairs at universities and think tanks, and that influence has always paid off. But you're also seeing a real recoiling against this rightward authoritarian drift of Turkey. And it was reflected, frankly, in the overwhelming vote we had in the last Congress to recognize the genocide, the first congressional recognition in decades, and one that I hope will set up the first presidential recognition of the genocide this April in many decades as well.
Certainly, you're not a tea leaf reader, but what do you think the Biden administration will do on that front?
I'm optimistic, and I've been burned before by presidents of both parties, but I'm optimistic both because Joe Biden understands this issue so well and has been a powerful advocate for genocide recognition, but also because there is so little appetite to carry Turkish water anymore. Those two things put together, I think, a pretty powerful reason for optimism. But we will find out soon enough. I will be advocating vigorously with the new administration to recognize the genocide, to reevaluate our relationship with Turkey, to give real teeth to Section 907 when it comes to Azerbaijan. And I know I'm still calling him the vice president. I know the new president. I certainly know the new vice president. I've worked for many years with Tony Blinken and Jake Sullivan. They're good people, and I will be using whatever influence I have with them on this very issue.
Mhm. The recent war in Artsakh, uh, has that given you and other leaders who are involved in intelligence, foreign policy, and whatnot pause to say that we need to very actively recalibrate how we view uh, not just the Armenia issue, but conflicts like this? There needs to be a recalibration. Do you not think of US foreign policy in that regard?
Well, I do. Frankly, after the last 4 years, we need to recalibrate our foreign policy in just about every way. But we need to give a greater attention to places like Artsakh, which are very realistically ripe for conflagration. This is what we were warning about for years when it came to Nagorno-Karabakh, that this place that so many Americans have never heard of could escalate into regional conflict or even wider conflict. And that's exactly what happened with the tragic loss of life. There are other places like this around the world where there's a similar potential for disaster. And we're much better off being proactive in trying to prevent that than having to deal with yet another crisis. So I do think that we need to recalibrate our focus, place greater emphasis on resolving some of these frozen conflicts so that they don't lead to further loss of life.
And earlier in the interview, you talked when we were talking about the siege on the Capitol, you were talking about, you were wondering how others are viewing this, which also goes to the American brand of democracy that has been going on as part of the US foreign policy. How do you think that is going to affect how others view America now? Are we wounded?
I think we're badly damaged. I mean, our standing in the rest of the world has really plummeted. I had a conversation recently with a former NATO Secretary General about how the rest of the world views the United States now. And all too many places, as a result of the last 4 years, the US is an unreliable ally. The US as not particularly devoted to democracy the way they thought that we were. They view us as having enormous internal problems with insurrection, with gridlock. But I am pleased to see, really, from the very first moments of Joe Biden's win in the election, the new president reaching out to foreign leaders to say we are back, that we are going to prioritize our transatlantic relationship and our partners, that we are going to once again champion democracy and human rights, that yes, we have a lot of work to do in our own country, but we will be unabashed supporters of democratic movements around the world. And we will stand up to autocrats around the world. The days of making common cause with the Putins and the Erdogans and others are over. The last 4 years, we showed nothing but ridicule for fellow democracies, and our president showed nothing but admiration for other despots. That's over, and thank God it is. And nonetheless, it's going to take real time to persuade the rest of the world that the experience they've seen in the last 4 years is not representative of who we are as a people. And that work can't take place more quickly from my point of view.
Of course, despite everything else that has happened, the elections prevailed and the votes of the people were counted. So still, we hold that high bar, and that is an example to the world, don't you think?
Yes. The good news, and we're all desperate for good news, is an historic number of Americans turned out to vote. The election was free. The election was fair. The election was secure. It produced a convincing result. We did all that during a pandemic. And we did that despite the best efforts of the occupant of the presidency. So we went through a real stress test with our democracy. And we survived it. We passed our stress test. But nonetheless, our ship of state took on a lot of water. that we're going to need to address. And that process begins now. And I'm optimistic. As the president said on Inauguration Day, we have a history of resilience and perseverance. We see only opportunities. That's sort of the American character. And it was nice to be reminded of that.
Mm-hmm. As we enter a new Congress with a new administration, what are some of the things that you think the Armenian American community can do in order to be part of this new unity that's being called for by the president?
Well, I think that it's going to fall on all of us, the new president and vice president and members of Congress, but also neighbor to neighbor, to move beyond this period of division. This last presidency divided not just neighbor from neighbor, but family member from family member. And we need to get back to talking to one another again, and with respect, and with an eye towards healing, getting beyond this period of darkness and division. So I think that the Armenian community, just like every other community, will need to mend the divisions within the community as well as without. I do think also that the period that we've been through is also a reflection of all the stress and strain of the pandemic and all of the economic uncertainty and anxiety. That insurrection was the product of a lot of forces. And I do think that when we get the pandemic under control and defeated, and people are going back to work and they're back to seeing their loved ones, and we're back to a sense of community, that it'll create a virtuous momentum that will be healing. But what we do in our individual lives can accelerate that process or retard it. And so we all have an important role to play.
Congressman Schiff, thank you for joining me again. We'll check back in with you in a couple of months. Good luck on your 20th year. And let's hope that together we're all going to make a difference in how our countries run and manage. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and amen to that.
Have a good day.
Take care, Ara.